Okay, so there have been some questions about the difference between the lay flat method and the, I guess, more traditional method in wrapping albums. And then beyond that, there was a question specifically about the difference between wrapping the quote unquote wings of the spine for the lay flat method on the inside or the outside in the construction. So I am going to show you both some albums that have been made using the different methods, as well as the construction of the album. And we're going to make some mini minis that are going to be 3.5 by 4.5 with a 1.5 inch spine. We're going to make them in the traditional way. We're going to make them in the lay flat way with the album spine being wrapped to the outside and with the album spine being wrapped to the inside, so that you can better decide maybe which method is right for you, or if you want to try one of the ones that you're not used to making. So let's start by looking at two different album bases that I've made with the lay flat method, one having the spine wings wrapped to the outside and one having the spine wings wrapped to the inside, and take a look and see how they differ. So if you'll notice on the spine of this one, there is a bit of a space, I think you can see it here, between the, there we go, between the cover piece and the spine piece on the album, which is very similar to that 1/4 inch space you use in traditional album construction, where you have to leave a space between the chipboard in order for it to not crack. And so in this one, it's very similar in that way. You can see that the wings, you see the seam here where it was wrapped to the outside on both sides here. I got a little ink on this one, so just disregard that. And on the inside of them, let me see if I can get a better shot. But that space between the two is evident. Between the cover piece and the spine piece is evident even in the inside of the album construction. And this is for the one where the wings were wrapped onto, let me get this in the light right, where the wings were wrapped onto the outside of the front and back cover. On this one here, it was constructed, if you can see, where there is no space between the spine chipboard and the front and back covered chipboard. And we're able to do that without fear of cracking because of wrapping the wings for the spine on the inside of the album. And on this one, you're not going to be able to see them wrapped either because I've also got them covered. But on this one, you can see there's no space left between the outside cover and the spine, even on the inside of the album. It's just a seamless hinge that we've created. Now disregard if you're wondering what on earth has she done with her page attachment there. It's because I use an expandable hinge attachment that I sort of came up with in some way to suit my needs on that. So that may not be something that works for you. But for today, we're just discussing the spine and how this one has absolutely no space between it. And it's a seamless, very clean look, as opposed to this one, which again is still very clean look. It's just more of a rounded look on the corners. And there is that space, that 1/4 inch space between the chipboard of the spine and the chipboard of the front and back cover. Okay, so then really quickly, I'm going to show you a couple completed albums that differ in that way. So again, on this one here, this is one where there is no space between the chipboard on the front and the back cover. It's very sturdy. It lays completely flat. I can literally take this book and do this, and I'm not going to end up with any cracking, no issues on the spine at all. It's very sturdy, but it has a very clean, sort of tight look in the construction. It sits very nicely on a shelf. It's very, I like it. It's a very neat look. This one here I constructed by attaching the wings on the outside of the album, and I did so because I wanted to be able to have a wrapping of this glitter paper around the album itself. Now I have to tell you, the reason I decided to do this though was because I didn't leave enough of a space here and my paper cracked. And so I needed to come up with a way to repair it. And how I did that was I used this very fine glitter paper and I backed it onto some Tyvek, and then I wrapped it around my album. Now that's a whole nother discussion for a whole nother day. As we like to say, it's a horse of another color, but that's kind of a repair issue that was utilized to be able to do that. So yes, there are times where you may want that wrapped on the outside because you want to be able to carry either a fabric covering or a paper covering seamlessly from the front around the spine to the back of the album, and that would certainly make sense. This one is one where I wrapped them on the inside, very similar to traditional album construction. And in doing so, yes, I'm able to, lay it flat, but it just feels a little, this album itself is just a little bit wobbly. It doesn't have a lot of structure, especially because it's such a large album. This one here, I can't remember. It measures 8.5 by 8.5. And also when you wrap them like that and you have that little 1/4 inch, it kind of makes your album a little bigger even. So this was, this measures actually 8 3/4 because that 1/4 inch space that I have to leave between the hinge and the, here, this is a good way to see it. I don't know if you can see that movement there. Is that catching it? But you can kind of see that I've had to leave this 1/4 inch space here between the hinge and the album cover. It's still, I mean, look, this is still a great album. It's still very sturdy. It lays flat. I just, haven't been real happy with the wiggly nature of it. You go to grab it and it kind of does this little slippage thing. In my experience, it just hasn't been as firm or sturdy of a construction. Maybe sturdy isn't the right word. It's still a very strong album, but it has this extra movement to it that I don't really like when I put the wings on the outside as opposed to when I put them on the inside. So that brings us to our review of the 3 different types of album wrapping that I'm going to show you today. This one is the traditional type. So I'm going to make a 3.5 by 4.5 album. And I have my pieces of chipboard that are cut to 3.5 by 4.5, and I have a 3.5 by 1.5 inch piece for the spine. If I lay these out onto my paper, and this is a 5.5 by 12 piece of paper here that I've cut, and I want to leave an inch all the way around, even in the traditional album wrapping methods that I've seen, this isn't going to be a large enough piece for what I'm trying to do. So now I get into this scenario where I need to attach a seam. And again, none of these things are a problem. They're just sort of things that you have to do that make it a little bit cumbersome, because now I'm going to end up with a very long piece. And keep in mind, these are only 4.5 inches wide. Most of our albums are more wide than that. So we end up with these pretty large pieces that we have to maneuver as a single unit to wrap them in the traditional way. And most people that I've seen who do this, and how I used to do it myself even, was you would put some tape, on your seam here. Get it all the way to the edge. I know everybody uses different things. I tend to use the inking cubes to cut my tape with. They're small, they fit in my hand, and I can sort of rip the tape against them. Okay, so, a lot of people were just going to burnish this down. Expose this. And usually what is done is you're going to overlap by 1/4 inch. Lay it on top of that taping portion there that's exposed. I didn't get that very straight, but that's okay. It's just for wrapping it. And you're going to go ahead and burnish it down, and you've got your piece. And now you've got to lay it out so that the seam doesn't fall in an odd way for it to not want to wrap correctly. And so in this case, maybe we'll have the seam fall somewhere around here. Oh, wait, this way. Middle of that spine. We're going to need to leave 1/4 inch between the front and the back piece. And how I've usually done this in the past, and it doesn't matter if you want to use dry adhesive or wet adhesive. I mean, everybody has their little preferences. And honestly, this whole discussion that we're having really does come down to personal preference. Everybody has their way that they like to do it. And that's just, you know, that's just fine. So I'm kind of get a general visual idea of where I want this to be. And I have no idea how straight I'm being on here. I'm sort of guessing. Let's say that's almost straight. I don't know. And then how I've done it and how I've seen others do it in order to keep that spacing between your spine and the chipboard in such a way that it's not going, you know, that it allows allows for the paper to move in that hinged way without fear of it cracking, is to come along here, maybe, and put a piece of 1/4 inch tape, or just eyeball 1/4 inch over, before then putting down, let's stay in the frame here, before putting down subsequent pieces. It's been a while since I've made an album like this, so I'm going to use a spacer here to kind of edge up. Okay. And then we would follow with another piece of 1/4 inch tape as a spacing element between them. Burnish it down, get some glue on it. Kind of make sure I'm keeping everything straight. I definitely started it off on an angle. I'm going kind of funny here. And then I'm going to want to come along here, and I'm going to want to keep about 1 inch on my edge, so that I've got that even spacing to wrap around. So let's just kind of trim this down like that. Trim this side down. Okay, I really did get that a little crooked on there, but that's okay. Okay, so for traditional album making, then we then come and, you know, sort of gently at first get this to where it's wanting to wrap around this piece we've made. And this doesn't seem so bad because I'm doing a mini, but when we get into the larger album constructions, it becomes quite a cumbersome thing. And that to me was my first reason for wanting to try the lay flat method. Was it was just so much work to have to come through and, you know, just manhandle this giant piece of this conglomeration that I had created, right? This huge, almost monstrosity of a piece, until I got it into a size that was a little bit more manageable. And then we would come and miter the corners, which I still do. By the way, I've modified mine just a little bit. And so we're going to miter all of our corners on here. And I do think that making mini minis or micro minis is a really great way to practice, because it was a really good point that it gets expensive. You know, making these mistakes on these giant albums that we're putting together, it can get really costly. Okay, so we're gonna then take off our tape And whether you choose to use tape to adhere it down or whether you choose to use glue, it doesn't really matter. It's the same sort of workings at this point. You're going to put some sort of adhesive on these 1-inch overhangs that you've got, and you're going to adhere them down, making sure everything is in place. Same thing over here. It's been a while since I've made one like this, so please forgive me if I'm you may be yelling at me going, I don't do it that way. I know, it's fine. I don't usually do this. I've moved on to a different method, and we're gonna do our sides. And then this is the part I kind of don't like in mitering these this way, is that you have to do this weird little fold in on these corners. I don't like having to do that. I'm not great at that. Sometimes they go in for me, sometimes they don't. And it just basically creates a lot of bulk on the corners, which I don't really like. So I will link my tutorial for how I do my albums now, and you can see how that differs. I'm really just mostly focused on trying to get the bulk off of those corners, which I didn't really do a great job of here. Yeah, see, it's just not my favorite. All right, not the point. Let's keep moving. So go ahead and apply my adhesive. And you get the drift. I'm sure that a lot of you either have made albums this way or are continuing to make albums this way. And that's fine. It works for you. That's, you know, that's what we're crafters. That's sort of the point, right? We're making things work for us. We're not, you know, just taking a one-size-fits-all approach to anything. We're making it fit our needs. So none of this is a right way or a wrong way. This is just an exploration of different ways. And so then, you know, you want to kind of come in here and make sure that you've got some sort of contact here in your this joint, I guess, for lack of a better word, or this, you know, this where we're creating this hinge here between our spine and our cover. And then let's see, we'll take one of these leftover pieces and cut. I did not have my inside piece cut for this one. So it is 3.5. And I'm just going to cut just a smidge under 3.5 because I do like that inside piece to come almost all the way to the edge. And let's just do it. Let's just do the whole width. Why not? And I used to be really picky about this, and I would put glue in certain places, and I'm kind of not anymore. But, you know, you do what works for you. I'm certainly not dictating that, again, that there's a right way or a wrong way. And this isn't even really a tutorial on, you know, how to do traditional album making. This is just a comparison. Compare and contrast. That's what I'm trying to do here. Just a quick little compare and contrast. Let me get that centered. And that's why I like using glue, because I have a little moment to wiggle it into place and really get that glue to take hold. And I would go along here and really kind of work that that spacing between my spine and my front and back cover so that it would be kind of connected, and make sure that I didn't have, it was almost doubling up on that paper there to give it extra strength. It's just something I did. Probably not something that's necessary. And then I would come over and I would actually fold these all the way over and give this really nice a nice little furnishing. And there you have a more traditional album construction, which there's nothing wrong with this. The reason I stopped doing it this way and started trying to do the construction of the album using the lay flat method, again, was because it became so cumbersome, because I was having this large piece that I was having to fold. And especially when I was getting into doing trifolds, or, you know, some sort of, I was doing a chipboard folio of some sort, where I would have these multiple pieces coming in. It was just, it was kind of, it was really obnoxious sometimes when I was trying to be able to fold them. So that's how I went from that. So that's the more traditional way. So now we're going to take a look at how we cover them using the lay flat method. And for one, I can use my scoreboard, because the pieces aren't ever going to be bigger than a 12 by 12, each individual piece. So I get a little bit more accuracy. As you saw, I was kind of going astray a bit when I was wrapping that one, especially when we end up with a long one. It's hard to sort of keep it straight. Anyway, this is what I'm going to show you right now. So for this one, instead of having that long piece, when we're doing the lay flat method, you're going to wrap each piece individually. You're going to wrap the cover, the back, and the spine individually, and then you're going to connect them using two of the side pieces that are on the spine in the wrapping method. And I'm going to show you that. And so in this method, you take your pieces and you cut them 2 inches larger than the actual piece of the chipboard for the front and back cover. And then that will give you a 1 inch spacing all the way around. I like to use spacers to do this. And for, you know, nearly 2 years or so, maybe even longer, I'm not sure, at least a year and a half, I was doing this with, I had some hand cut pieces of chipboard that I used. So I just cut some pieces that were 1 inch wide, and that's what I used. I now use these spacers that I purchased from Country Craft Creations. I love them because they are brightly colored and I don't lose them on my desk, and they're nice and sturdy, and they do the job that I need them to do. So, so in this method, again, you cut your front and back covering pieces 2 inches larger in both width and height. You space it around, you end up with this kind of perfectly centered piece every time. And then what I do is I turn it over to the right side, or the side with the paper on it, and I take my bone folder and I run it along these edges to sort of train the paper to start going where I want it to go. And then, much like you do with the traditional method, you just kind of stand up and fold it over, and you really burnish those folds very firmly. Okay. And then what we do is we cut out our corners. And so we're just going to literally cut the squares out that were created from that folding. Go all around and do that. And then what I do that's a little bit different is I also miter them, and I'll get to that. So then what we do after we've like kind of done a rough cut of the squares is we'll fold one side around and just cut this little sliver. And you'll see why there is a, can you see that little overhang? Get this in focus. There's like a little nub piece there. We're going to trim that off. These are just little, I mean, these might be a little fussy step, but I don't mind it. It gives me really clean corners, and that's what I want. And it also gives me corners that aren't bulky. And that's definitely what I want, especially when I get to adhering the wings on the inside, I don't want the bulk of the corners to be pushing out in any way. Okay, so then this is where I do something a little bit extra. I take and I go ahead and miter the corners and cut the squares out. And that just makes it so that when I wrap them, I don't have to do that odd little thing where you have to pinch in those little tiny pieces on the corners. And it also, again, takes the bulk out. So do this. Okay. Now I'm left with something that looks like this. So I've got this little notch out of the center of my mitered corners. And it looks weird, but what it allows me to do is to just simply wrap them. They're always covered, and I don't have any bulk at all on my corners. So I go around and I glue my sides on. I'm kind of going pretty fast on this. I do have a more in-depth tutorial. Again, I'm just really trying to show the difference between the three ways, not really go into the intricacies of, you know, all the little things we do, the little extra steps we do on each part to make them, you know, just so. All right. See, I didn't have to pinch any of those corners in. I didn't have to do anything at all. And I have, well, if I'll press my glue down, I have perfect corners every time in doing it that way. So if you can see, they're just a nice little tight corner without anything hanging out or sticking out. It's just works really well. I'm trying to smooth this out. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to wrap the other ones the same. I'm going to wrap the other cover piece the same way. You're going to end up with a piece like this. It's literally just a wrapped piece of chipboard. All I did was wrap it all the way around, okay? I'm going to wrap the other one the same way, but I'm going to do something slightly different on the spine piece, and that's where these quote-unquote wings come into play. So on the spine piece covering, you know, for the covers, for the front and back cover of your album, you're cutting your covering piece 2 inches larger in width and 2 inches larger in length so that it can leave, oh, that's not my spine piece. Here it is. 2 inches larger in width and length so that you can have a 1 inch reveal all the way around. So for a 4.5 by 3.5 inch piece of chipboard, I cut them 5.5 by 6.5 inches so that we can, you know, wrap it with 1 inch all the way around. On the spine in this method, you cut 2 inches larger in the height, so top to bottom, however that's configured for your spine, and 3 inches larger on the width, and that's going to leave us 1.5 inches spacing on either side of your spine. So in this case, for a 1.5 inch spine, 3.5 inches tall, I'm cutting a piece that's 4.5 inches by 5.5 inches. So for it's 3.5 inches tall, I cut it at 5.5 inches tall to accommodate for 1 inch on the top and the bottom. It's 1.5 inches wide. I added 3 inches to it to accommodate for a 1.5 inch on either side. So that gives me 4.5 inches in width. And that's going to give me a perfectly centered spine piece here for this little mini that we're doing. So you're going to attach your glue, and I am doing the spine on these lay flat examples in gray to show a contrast so you can clearly see the spine that's wrapped on the inside versus the outside. Smooth it out, make sure I don't have any glue overhanging around here. And then I'm going to do the same thing I did on the front and back cover. I'm going to go around all 4 sides with my bone folder, and it's probably even more important on the spine piece to do this than on the front and back cover, because I'm really training that paper to wrap around, and I'm going to show you why here in just a second. So I'm going to fold it over on itself, give it a good crease on all 4 sides, just in the same way I just did for the cover piece. And again. Okay. And then I'm going to cut out my corners just the same way I did, except this time they're rectangles instead of squares because I've got a longer 1.5 inch overhang on the sides. Okay, again, going around, and I'm going to trim ever so slightly right along here. Okay, and then I'm not going to miter on this one because on this one, the only thing we're going to wrap is our top and our bottom. So we're going to adhere the top and the bottom piece down just like this, but we're going to leave these wings out here, and that's how we're going to attach our front and back cover to the spine, is through the wings. So glue this down, make sure it's down all the way. I probably could have trimmed that a little bit more. Okay, now this is the key right here. So we wrapped them, they're down, it's nothing really exciting there, but you want to take your bone folder and you want to really train this paper to fall down flush with the bottom side of your chipboard. And what you're going to end up with is something that looks like this, where you've really got that ridge in place, where it's sort of wrapped around, but only on the side, and then you still have your wings sticking out. So it's flush with the bottom of the chipboard. Okay, these wings are flush with the bottom of the chipboard. And the reason we're going to do that is because when it comes time to attach them, you are literally going to butt these two pieces right up next to each other. There won't be a space between the chipboard of the spine and the chipboard of the cover. And how I know I've done that is I push it up against each other, and when I push down, it makes it kind of pop up. And I know I'm right there in that right spot. And that's how I'm attaching them when I attach them on the inside. If I am attaching them on the outside, however, I don't do that crease step, okay? So let's go ahead and press it back down. And let's show you what it's going to be like attaching them on the outside first and then on the inside. So for the method that we're going to use to attach them on the outside of the spine, we're going to do the exact same thing that we did for the traditional album construction. And we're going to put our 1/4 inch tape right up next to the spine of this, the chipboard of the spine here. On both sides, and that's going to act as a spacing for us, because again, if we're going to wrap it on the outside, regardless of the method, we have to have a space between the chipboard, otherwise it's going to pull the paper apart. It's going to be too much stress on the paper there. Okay, so we're going to make sure that we've got our 1/4 inch tape burnished down. And then I would come along here and put glue right up next to that edge of the 1/4 inch tape. Like right up next to the edge of the 1/4 inch tape. take my album cover, lay it down right along there. In fact, we can do this in the scoreboard to make sure we're straight. We've got our tops and bottoms all straight in here. Okay. And then once that's attached, there we go. Go ahead and give that a burnishing down. And again, this is the contrast is what I'm trying to show you here. So you're going to see some of the black from the cover piece showing through here. That would happen anyway. You wouldn't see that because it would be the same color. And so then you're going to end up with a piece that looks like this. We're going to attach the other one in the same way. We're going to put our glue right up next to that 1/4 inch tape. Put the piece on here. Get it nice and straight. Adhere it down. Okay, just like that. Okay, so then we're going to take a piece that's going to cover the inside of our spine, and that's going to give it some more strength, right? And so we want to go ahead and remove the backing from our tape that was used as a spacer, but that I also, used to really attach that those two pieces of paper together, that front piece and the back piece, sort of doubling up on it in that way. And what I would do in this case, because I didn't want to get the glue in with that tape and the spacers, is I would take and make some pencil marks here on kind of where I want to put my glue. Get the glue all on this side. Get the glue, and I really want to make sure that those where the chipboard ends between those spacers, that I've got glue there on those edges so that it doesn't buckle at any point. Get the glue over here, and then just to make sure I've got it edge to edge. Ooh, I'm really being messy. I'm going to come around here. Like that. Lay it down. Kind of feeling with my fingers to see if it's, top to bottom where I want it to be. And go ahead and start really spreading out that glue. If any leaks out, I just clean it up. Just like that. And then I'm doing the same exact thing I did on the traditional album construction, where I'm really trying to work these hinges, for lack of a better word, between the front and back cover where they attach to the spine. And I'm really just trying to make sure that I've got really good contact with them. I'll even stand them up and just really make sure that that crease, it has adhered on this where I need it to. Turning it over, doing the same thing. And going over it with my bone folder. And it's really evident here on this gray paper side, the connection that I'm making in that sort of spacing there, okay? So you can see it here, but you can really see it here, how I've really created a place where those two pieces of paper are now adhered as one, and the album can now move. It's sturdy, it's not going anywhere. And so that is the way they're wrapped when they go to the outside. It creates more of a rounded edge on your, on the corners of, kind of the edge of your spine here. It's a little bit you know, it's not as squared off and true to size. It's now a little bit larger than a 1.5 inch spine, and it's a little larger than a 4.5 inch, you know, length on this, because you've got this 1/4 inch on either side for this spacer that's necessary. But still, this is a great method because look, I can still fold this. It's very sturdy. I can, you know, take my entire album and fold it back on itself. I'm not going to have any cracking or any issues at all here with the spine. So traditional method, not quite, you know, it's very similar. It's just that it's a little bit cumbersome. The lay flat method is one where I wrap each one individually and I'm attaching it, but both of these are essentially kind of an outer wrapping sort of method to the spine. Now let's go on to what I choose to do. It's not right or wrong, it's just what I choose to do right now. And that is to wrap my wings on the inside. Okay, so I went ahead and wrapped my front and back covers and my spine in the same way that I did with the lay flat method where I apply the wings on the outside. But this time we're going to do the lay flat where the wings are applied on the inside. And in this method, they are butted straight up next to that, you know, the chipboard. You can see like it's right, that ridge is right along each other on the chipboard, and that's where they are attached. So there's no spacer. I'm not using my 1/4 inch tape or a 1/4 inch space of any kind. I am simply going to apply glue on the wing and on my front and back cover and apply them just like that. So the only thing you have to be careful of is you do not want to get glue in right in this ridge. I don't want glue on the edge of my front or back cover, and I don't want glue in this ridge here that I'm butting up next to, because that needs to be able to open freely as a hinge. Okay, so how I address that, and again, I use my bone folder to go along both sides of my spine piece so that I can create this ridge, right? Oh, I'm not really getting it. So I can create this ridge like that. Oh. There you go. There you can see it. And I'm going to come in here with my glue. I'm not going to lay this out in a, you know, in my scoreboard. I'm not going to, you know, necessarily try to do anything to line it up. This just lines up naturally on its own, and that's another reason that I really like this way of doing it. So I'm going to take my glue and go all along sort of the edge of the wing piece that's coming off of this, of the spine piece here. But what I'm going to do is I'm only going to apply glue about a 1/4 of an inch away. You can see that. I'm going to apply the glue about a 1/4 of an inch away from the edge of the chipboard of the spine piece. And then I'm filling in everywhere else on this wing. Okay. Then on my cover piece, I'm going to apply glue about an 1/8 to a 1/16 of an inch away from that edge. It's going to look about like that. And there's a couple spots here I feel like are a little close, and so I'm going to come in here with my thumb or my thumbnail, and I'm just going to kind of draw that back. And where I really want to make sure that I've got a good amount of, you know, of glue here is I want to make sure that I've got a nice little tiny little dollop at the ends, both here and here. Let me see, both here and here when I'm putting that down, because I really want to make sure that that is adhered, okay? And so then I'm just simply going to butt the pieces right up next to each other, right up next to each other. And I know I'm in the right spot when I push down and it lifts up the spine piece, okay? And I am just making sure that top, bottom, I'm good, and I seem to be really good there. I'm happy with it. I'm going to sort of give it a little bit of pressure from this side. Then I'm going to turn it over, and I'm going to take my bone folder or whatever tool you want to use, and I'm going to press, and I've got glue coming out the top and bottom of this wing piece, and that's totally fine with me. That tells me I have glue all the way to the edges, and that makes me happy. But where I don't want glue coming out is right here in this in-between spot, and I don't have any there. I'm going to go ahead and burnish this down, and I am going to put a couple clips on it. If I can find them. Put a couple clips on it just to hold that corner in place, because I want that glue to set really well there in that corner. There's going to be a lot of movement there on that corner, okay? So now, while I'm waiting for that to sort of set, I'm just going to go ahead and do the same thing here. I'm going to come about 1/4 of an inch from the chipboard edge of that spine piece here. I'm going to fill in the rest of this with glue. And I'm not really being, I mean, I'm putting a decent amount of glue. I wouldn't say it's thick, but it's definitely, you know, I said in another video, it's not a lot of glue, but it's a lot of coverage. And I think that's a good way to describe it. I'm making sure that I've got a good amount of coverage. It's fully covering that area with a fine bead of glue. And again, I'm making sure that these two tips here have a goodly amount of glue on them. I'm gonna take my thumbnail or my finger or something and kind of rub back any glue that might have gotten a little too close to that edge. That's as long as I need those clips on there for. That's just gonna kind of let it set. I'm gonna nestle this edge of my cover, front or back cover, in that little groove that we made where the spine piece, where the paper wraps around the spine piece. I know I'm in the right spot because as I push down, it sort of lifts it up. And I mean, I am right on it. And I'm gonna give it a good little burnishing down. I'm happy actually to see a little bit of glue seeping out of the top and the bottom of that wing, because that tells me I have full coverage of glue. I'm really in the right place here. But I do want to check and make sure I don't have any glue in that little area there, and I don't, which is great. Go ahead and press this down again. I'm going to put a little clamp on here, and we're going to let that set for a little bit. And while I let that set, I am going to put some score tape on the back of the piece that's going to cover our inside spine. So on this one here, I just used glue across. We had the tape in the seams. This is the traditional way, and I put it down, and that's just good to go. On this one here, I did the same thing with the glue, had the tape. You see how it's a little bit more flexible on wrapping the lay flat on the outside than the traditional method that has a little bit more of a firm quality to it. I have found that using, and it is a brand specific thing, and you guys, I like to get like the cheapest of this or the least expensive of that, but in this case it is brand specific. I like to use the score tape sheets. They have a thickness to them and a lot of body to them, and that is what's going to take this sort of wobbliness to something that's a little bit more firm and keep it all really straight and true. So let's go ahead and put some score tape on the back of that inside spine cover piece. And how I like to do this, and again, all of these things I'm showing you, these are just things that I have found that work for me. They are not the right way. You are probably going to come up with another way that works great for you, and if you do, share it with others, because we all get ideas from that. I'm just simply sharing what I have found at this point that works for me, and that's all I got on that. So I'm going to peel back a corner. I'm going to kind of get my corner set on here, make sure I'm straight on my sides, and then I'm going to go ahead and peel the score sheet back. I happen to cut this one at 6 inches long on purpose because I wanted to be able to fit inside of the score sheet that I have. And then I'm just going to lightly draw my finger blade right down the edge until it releases. I'm going to save this for another project. I'm going to burnish that down really good. Make sure that the double-sided, part of the adhesive is really adhered to the paper. I'm going to go ahead and take these clamps off. And I cut mine to be pretty much exactly the same size as the I prefer to have mine pretty much the exact same size top to bottom as the album that I'm making. I want full coverage on that. So for me, that's how I do it. Some people, they do it like 1/8 of an inch shorter or 1/4 of an inch shorter. Even you do it the way you want to do it. This is just how I do it. Okay. And so I'm going to take this and sort of position it. Let's go this way. Position it top and bottom where I want, and this is a feel thing. I'm basically just using my fingers to feel where the edges are here, how it's laying, okay? Get it where I want it to be. That looks good to me. I'm gonna go ahead and peel the rest of this off. Lay it down. Yep, I like it. Give it a good burnishing. And really work all of the edges specifically. Make sure that they're down and they're not, I don't have any stickiness, and I don't. There's no, tape hanging out in any places here. And then it's, I'm gonna, similar thing that I did before. It's just that I don't have that large space in between. I'm just gonna work in those seams here and those joints that I've made where, or this hinge basically that I made by attaching the front and back spine to each other. And in this method, you can lay it all the way over, give it a nice firm little burnishing there. Just kind of increase the acuteness of my angle as I continue to rub lightly with my bone folder in that joint. And that's it. That is our spine attachment with the wings on the inside as opposed to the outside. And you end up with just a really nice, neat, clean, I don't know if you can see that, just a really neat, clean attachment of the spine. Now, obviously you wouldn't do it with, 2 different colors like this, but, it's nice to see the contrast between them and how that would work. And so for me, this is just a really nice, firm way to grab an album. It's not going to be wiggly. When I grab this one, there's a way for it to wiggle. This one is perfectly firm on its own, the traditional method. So let's just recap here very quickly. The traditional method of wrapping our albums, where we create a singular sheet of paper and wrap the entire album as a singular unit, that has, been used by many people for a long time, and it works great. There's no real problems with how this works. You're able to wrap the album. There's a couple things I don't like about it. One is that you almost always have to have a seam somewhere, and no matter how artfully you try to put that together, sometimes I just don't like the way it looks. And the other is that it can be very cumbersome when you have several covers that are large and spines, and you're trying to wrap all of this in one thing. It becomes quite a feat, and it's hard to kind of keep it straight. There's some issues that I had with it. So that's when I tried the lay flat method. In my first attempt at using the lay flat method, I wrapped them on the outside because that was sort of what I was used to, having that 1/4 inch spacing, similar to the traditional method of wrapping them. And I found that I liked it. I thought it worked really well. The things that I didn't necessarily like about it was really wiggly. There was a lot of play in it, as I showed you in the example of this album here. This is a large album, and it sort of slides itself down in a way that I just didn't really like. I wanted my book to be a little bit more firm in places, but still, it's a great way to wrap it. It still works really well. It does the job. I'm very happy with this album, even though that's the case with that one. Then, and also if you wanted to wrap a covering around the album, you know, from the front to the back of the album. You wanted something to go all the way around the album. This would be a way to do that and be able to still use the lay flat method if you didn't want to get into that large, cumbersome wrapping situation. So you could still wrap each piece individually and have your spine kind of wrapped on the outside, and that would allow you to do some other wrappings like that. And then that takes us to the lay flat method, which this is kind of the more traditional structure of the lay flat method, where the spine attachment actually goes on the inside of the album. And that was the example that I showed you here with this album. And in fact, I think you can probably see it better on this one. Yeah, I think it's harder to see on the black, but on this one, it's really pretty evident. So you can really see how those that spine piece here, let's go ahead and open this guy up. You can really see how that spine is clean and crisp, and you have very straight edges all around. The whole book will still open up and lay perfectly flat. I don't have to worry about spacing. I don't have to worry about something cracking here. It is just, I really like this method. It works for me. But again, you know, we're crafters, and what do? We make things work for us. And this is what works for me, but that doesn't mean it's what's going to work for you. And you may have a method that you do that is so much more superior. And if you do, please share it because I'm always trying to learn and try new things. But this was just in an answer to some questions about, you know, first of all, why would you use the lay flat method? And I think we kind of went through some issues that the traditional wrapping has. And when would you want the lay flat method to have the spines on the outside or the inside, and what those look like? I hope this helped. I hope this answered some of those questions, or maybe this even created more questions that you have. And if that's the case, please ask them or comment in the comments below. I am always really excited to have conversations with other crafters and learn and share and grow from and with them. So I hope you guys are having a great night, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.